everyone. Welcome to my session. Lovely that is the first session of today's workshop, and I will be talking you through getting compliance right from day one. So just as Panache has said, scaling from zero implies that, right from the point when you start your business, where you decide you have a solution, you have a problem that needs solving, and your solution is the best for the market, and you want to go ahead and build that out. It's very important that you have your compliance right from that first day, because failing to do that means complications or issues further down the line. So I'm just going to be talking you through some of the important things that you should be thinking about or be considering if you haven't already done that, or just things to walk you through in terms of how you can be thinking around your compliance for your startup. Okay, so all right, so I will do a brief introduction about myself. My name is Uduak Ekpe, and I handle legal and compliance at Legal Trunk. And some of the work I've done in the last 45 years and stuff that I'm really passionate about is helping startups get their legal and compliance right early on in order to simplify in order to make their legal processes as simple, as straightforward, as seamless and possible, and avoid complications down the line. So my work involves helping early stage startups. I mean, not just early stage, primarily focused on early stage, but companies and startups of all ages go through their corporate structuring, helping them figure out their tax obligation, intellectual property protection, and regulatory compliance across different jurisdictions. As I said, my focus is trying to make legal and compliance as simple as possible and less intimidating for founders. Very important, because I know that when people hear legal or when people hear founders, there's already that is law. I don't know. There's something that's just going to bamboozle me. So my goal is to make it as simple and as easy as possible for you to understand. I'm also a certified designated compliance professional with the Compliance Institute of Nigeria. So I will move on to I can't see the controls for my slide. Okay, let me just go back here. All right, so my first point that I would be going through is, what is compliance? And there are different definitions, different ways that people think about it or look at it. But in simple terms, compliance is really you obeying the law, or as the word comply implies, obeying the law, doing business in line with the law, where you operate, where your customers are from, where your customers are based, or where your investors are from. So wherever you have business operations, compliance implies obeying the law and carrying out your business operations in accordance with the law in those jurisdictions, in simple terms. And why is why is compliance important? Proper compliance, properly done at the right time, means better credibility for you, because it communicates to your investors and to your stakeholders that you're serious about business, right? And you are serious about doing the right thing. It also unlocks funding. And when you communicate that you're serious, when you communicate that you're credible, that you're transparent and can be held accountable, those are some of the things that investors want to see before they invest in a business. So all in all, compliance is an important thing for anyone who has a company or is thinking about starting one. Now, as I said, I'm really going to be talking about compliance for startups, and I think that one of the one of the pertinent questions that we even need to answer, first of all, is where should you register a company, right? Because before you start thinking about compliance, that means that you already have a company in existence. or you already have a business that you need to be compliant in some way. I really want to do this. Hold up. Okay. So where should you register a business? So there are two options to registering a business. The first option is you can choose to register your business locally in whatever um country that you operate in. So say you're a Nigerian doing a business in Nigeria, or carrying out business in Ghana, in Kenya, in Egypt, or any country. You can choose to register your business in that country. That's one way. Second way, or second location that you can choose to register your business is also in another jurisdiction, so somewhere separate from where you carry out your business operations. For instance, you can have a business that primarily operates in Ghana and choose to register your business in Delaware, or have a business that primarily operates in Nigeria and choose to register your business in the UK. These are all different places that you can register your business. Sorry. Now, after answering the question of, oh, where are the possible places that you can register your business, the next thing that you want to think about is what I really want to be able to go to the next slide while I'm on this page, but for some reason that's not working. Okay. All right. So for the next question is, why should you register a business? What are the things that you need to think about when you are registering a business, right? Or what are the things that should determine whether or not you even register a business? And one of the things to think about, one of the key considerations that you should have when registering a business is, are you doing it for global expansion? So for instance, as I mentioned, imagine that you are a business that is registered in Nigeria and you're trying to expand to a global audience. Then that's a consideration. Wanting to expand globally is a consideration to registering your business in another jurisdiction. Another reason would also be if you want to receive payments internationally. So even if you're not necessarily expanding to all those jurisdictions, that means you're not setting up business operations in each of those countries, but you still want to be able to transact, carry out businesses, or receive payments from people in multiple jurisdictions, then that's another consideration for registering a business. Another reason is also for fundraising purposes. So if you are looking to raise funds, registering your business, especially in a foreign country, is one of the things that you would need to consider, because some investors require that as a prerequisite for investing in your business. Now, another thing is also for banking services. So to be able to access banking in some jurisdictions, you might need to have a company registered in that location. So for instance, it is probably easier to register to have a US business bank account with a US registered company, as opposed to a company registered in another jurisdiction. Now I've talked about some of the things that you need to, like, key considerations. I think that one important question that I want to answer with this webinar is, or with this workshop, is, when should you register a business abroad and when should you not? And I believe that this is an important point, because from my experience working with startups, sometimes people register businesses before they're ready or before they even need it. And that has repercussions, because now you're incurring costs that you're not financially ready as a business to incur. And so before you decide if you want to register a business, there's some points that you need to ask yourself, some questions you need to ask before to help you decide if you are ready to register a business abroad or not. So my first question, or rather, before I move on, I have a question. There's a poll in the chat that you can easily answer. And I just want to know, if you're currently on this call, where is your business registered right now? I'd like to be able to look at it and just see a variety of answers of where you currently have your business registered. before I move forward. So I'm just going to give a minute or two for that. I believe Panache has shared that in the chat already.
Yeah, hi Uduak. Yes, it's in the chat. So people can just click on the link there and they'll be directed to the Slido portal where they can just input their answer.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to see this slider, but it's not opening yet. But I hope people are putting in the answers. I'll come to the presentation. So now it's my question of when should you register abroad? So some indicators that you're ready or that you should be considering registering abroad. One, if you're raising funds from international VCs that require a foreign entity. So for instance, some in that in their jurisdiction, majorly because that's the terrain that they're familiar with. They're familiar with the legal structure and operations in those countries. And so they prefer to invest in a company that is registered in those jurisdictions. Now, if you're in that situation, then you can go ahead and consider registered business, but you still need to consider the next point I'm going to expatiate on. So the next point is, do you have plans to expand into foreign markets in short to medium term? That's another question that you need to ask yourself before you decide to register a business abroad. Um, generally, you can register a business without having business operation in um, most of these countries that are popular for foreign registration, say Delaware in the US, in the UK to an extent. I think places like the Isle of Man or Mauritius, there are a couple of countries like that that people register in, and you don't necessarily need to have business operations in. But one reason why this is still an important thing to consider is because when you get to the question of trying to have a bank account in some of those countries, the regulations or the requirements for some of those banks are changing as the years go by, and some of those banks are starting to require that you have business operations in those countries where you're registered. So it's not enough to just have a business registered. Sometimes they even ask that you have operations in that country. So you need to be able to ask yourself this question if you're going to have if you have plans to expand into that market in the short to medium term. Um, Now, another point is if you're a company that operates in a highly regulated space where reputation matters, then that's a good consideration to register a business abroad. So for instance, if you say operate in the if you're a financial institution or a fintech or operate in the financial market and say you're involved in cross-border payments or cross-border transactions, of course, for a company like that, it's necessary that you register abroad because it indicates it improves investor and consumer trust when they see that their money is safely protected by the laws of multiple jurisdiction. Is also necessary because if you are doing payments across different countries, you need to be authorized in those countries that you are transferring payments between to actually carry out those transactions. So of course, that's a very good reason for wanting to register abroad. And then if you want to leverage on the tax or IP protection in certain regions, so there are certain tax havens in quotes that people choose to register in. There are certain regions that have very strong intellectual property protection laws, and that may be a reason for you to consider registering in those jurisdictions. Another point is if you are in a global accelerator or a grant program that requires a foreign registration. So sometimes that may also be the case. Now, having talked about when it's a good idea to register a company, I want to also talk on the flip side of when is it not a good idea to register a company abroad. And first point, if your product is still in MVP stage, you have no business registering a business abroad. Very important. Um, if your primary market is local, you have no business registering abroad. And the reason that I say this is, and I want to be very clear in as I say this, registering or having a foreign company is not a badge of honor or anything. It's not something that you should do just because you don't want to miss out or you don't want to feel right? I think that should be a business strategy that should be intentionally thought through and should be adding some sort of value to your company. So if it's not doing any of those, then all you're going to be doing is actually just incurring additional costs further down the line. And so for instance, when I said a point to consider if you want to register abroad is if you're going to expand in the short to medium term. Now, to link it to when you should not register. If you're not, by short to medium term, sometimes I don't mean if you're not going to have business operations within a year, it's probably not a good idea to register. And the reason that it is not is because if you register a business this year, by this time next year, you would be due for certain compliance filings in the country where you're registered. So you would already have, depending on where it is, you may have taxes to pay, you may have returns to file, and those things cost money, first of all. It's not your local currency, so it's definitely costing more. Secondly, because it's a jurisdiction you're not familiar with, you would likely need experts to be able to handle those filings in order to not make any mistakes. And that also has additional costs to it. So these are just some things that you need to be thinking about before you take that step to register a business abroad. You also need to have a clear business model and you need to have achieved product market fit. I already talked about cost and you can see here businesses that cannot afford the maintenance, whether the accounting or legal costs of maintaining a foreign entity should not register a business yet, so that something that should be a positive add to your business does not end up being a negative. And then if you lack if you lack access to the required support to remain compliant, you may want to pause until you find a trusted partner or a trusted advisor to help you in those steps. Again, this is very important because when you're registering in a jurisdiction that you're unfamiliar with, you want to make sure that you have people that are familiar with that system who will hold your hand and guide you through every step so that you're not making mistakes, you're not doing the wrong thing, and you're not incurring additional costs that you have no business incurring. So having said all that, if you look through all this and you decide, oh yeah, I'm a good fit, I think that this is a good thing to do. I qualify, right? And then you should definitely go ahead and register a business in the country that is most beneficial or makes the most sense to you based on your business direction and where you are looking to go. Now, I just want to talk through some of the mistakes that people make. I think I have another poll that should be in the chat by now. Panache, if you can help me put that out. But I also want to just talk through some of the mistakes that people make, and then feel free to share some of the things that maybe you've experienced in while going through running a business, starting a business. Is there anything that you've encountered at different point that you wish, oh, if I had known this earlier, I would not have made that mistake? I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your learnings. And the goal of this is that we're all able to learn and grow together. And so it's important that even among the audience, we're able to learn from each other. So some of the mistakes that people make, I think I figured out this thing. Yes, I have figured it out. All right. So some of the mistakes that people make is having incorrect or missing documentation when structuring their legal entities. And so when you're registering, there are certain things that you need to have. So say means of identification for the founders, the right shareholding structure, the articles of association or memorandum of association of the company, what the business will do. You want to make sure that those things are accurate and are a good representation or a good description of what the business does, just so that you're not making any mistake, because any mistake that is made, you would need to correct it later down the line. And again, these are things that doing it with an advisor or a support would help you to ensure that you're not making some of these mistakes. Another mistake or omission that people often make when it comes to properly structuring their business is leaving the intellectual property in the founders' names. So when you have a business, even though you are even though the business is, you are the owner of the business, you are the owner of the idea, in quotes. When you take that step to register a business, then all those things need to be transferred to the business that you are registering. And so some mistakes that people make is not having a proper intellectual property assignment agreement that conveys the interest in whatever creative idea, whatever trade secrets and whatnot that are created by the business, conveying those things to the company. Because when you don't do that, the essentially everything is in the founders' names. And if there are disputes or disagreements between the founders, it might also affect the stability or even whether the business is going to exist at the end of that disagreement or not. So that's an important thing. Another point would also be lacking the late or non-existent tax filings. As I mentioned, one of the things that you need to think about for compliance is that there are filings that need to be done every year. So I'm not going to bore you by listing out the filings in those countries, but just know that for every country that you choose to register in, there is a filing that needs to be done. For every country that you need to register in, there's a filing that needs to be done. There are taxes that need to be paid. There are returns that need to be filed. In some instances, you may be required to maintain a registered agent's address. That also requires fees. So some of these things, if you don't do them, the country assumes that you're no longer in business or you no longer intend to use the company, and they just shut it down. Or after a while, the company goes inactive, and then what you have is a company name but not actually in legal existence. So you want to avoid that. Another thing is not having foundational legal agreements. So what do I mean by this? I mean that when you start a company, when you start a business, important documents that you need include co-founder agreements that govern the relationship between the founders, even a shareholder agreement for maybe other shareholders that are not founders. You need employment contracts for every single person that works with the company. You need an IP transfer agreement to make sure that anyone who is creating any unique work, any intellectual property, all of that is being owned by the company so that there are no issues down the line. And then, and I will share an example of an issue. An example of a problem that you could run into if you don't do this is, imagine you have a business, right, that needs a tech solution. So say you want to do a fashion business, but you need someone to, but you have a unique spin on it, right? So it's not just e-commerce, right? Maybe you want to help people test out the clothes, like you want them to be able to visualize the clothes on the app before they make a purchase, and you need a developer to build out that product for you because I mean you're a fashion designer, not a tech expert. And then you have someone build out that product, and you're hiring them, paying them for that labor. If you don't have an intellectual property assignment agreement that assigns the work that that person has done to your company, if the person is um an unscrupulous person, they may come down the line and tell you, "Oh, I worked on this product. I built it. This is my creative ability. It should belong to me." And you would not have any legal document that would be able to protect you because you don't have that IP transfer agreement. So this is just an example of why some of these things are very important when you're thinking about compliance, because compliance is an entire holistic topic. It's not just taxes, neither is it just business registration. Business registration is just one part of the compliance. It's making sure that your compliance as it relates to taxes and regulatory filings. It also means that you're compliant as it relates to protecting your intellectual property. It means that you're compliant as it relates to data protection and adherence to whatever data protection regulations govern the location in which you carry out business. And which is my next point now. If you misunderstand the data protection laws, you read like that is you risk not being compliant and even having fines or consequences for those actions. So, for instance, when you, as a company, right, there's user data that you receive. So you have access to things like the name of the customer, the email address, maybe their residential address, depending on the kind of business that you do. Maybe you need their utility bill. Maybe you need you even have, depending on what kind of company you have or what you are doing, you might even have access to their location data. That is all those things are sensitive personal information that belongs to a person. And legally, when you're processing any of those kinds of information, there are laws that govern how that information should be processed, how that information should be passed from one person to another, how those things are even stored in your systems to ensure that the integrity of that data is protected at all times. You don't understand these things when you fail to adhere to these regulations, you're also being non-compliant, and then there are consequences, there are penalties, there are fines that you would get because of that non-compliance, and that's something that you want to avoid. Another point, I believe this goes without saying, but I think is also an important thing to mention is the importance of separating personal from business finance. And I think this is easier when you are a sole proprietor, so you are the sole owner of your business. And even if it's registered as a company, but you are the 100% shareholder of the company, it can be easy to blur the line between business and personal. But this is very important because um, one, you want to make sure that you can properly document and explain what income is the business bringing in, what are the business expenses, what are the things that I need to pay taxes on, what is my own income. So keeping those two things separate is very important because it also affects other types of compliance. As I said, there's taxes, and for you to be able to file your taxes, you need to be able to properly and accurately assess how much income, how much expenses, what the deductible allowances are, and things like that. And if you've mixed business and personal, then it gets complicated to be able to untangle and separate all of those things. Now, the last point I want to mention here, that one mistake that people also make is either registering too early or registering in the wrong jurisdiction. What does registering too early mean? So first of all, generally, we recommend that once you have a business, once you're ready to start, register your business, right? So that you secure the name, so that the name is protected, and so that everything that you are doing is in the name of the company that you are building. But when you just have an idea, you don't even know how you're going to start doing it, you don't have a business model yet, you don't have an MVP, it's just an idea in your head. Is that the best time to register a business? Maybe not. Again, because of the cost that starts to incur from the point of registration. And um, I know that, for example, Nigeria has relaxed laws in quotes. The laws are favorable to businesses that are just starting up in the sense that when you're a new business, there are certain tax reliefs that you get, and so you may not be required to start paying taxes from the very first year of registering. So in that regard, you may not see the importance of, or you may not see the need to not register too early. But then when you start registering in other jurisdictions where some of these tax reliefs do not exist, you would begin to appreciate the importance of not registering a business too early, because it doesn't really matter whether you made any income or not, whether you made any profits, whether you're running at a loss, because you are registered, there are certain obligations that are expected of you legally. Another thing would also be registering in the wrong jurisdiction. Um, Again, this is why it's important that there are cogent reasons before you register a company. Imagine registering a company in, maybe you register a company in the US because all the startups are registered in the US. Whereas maybe you don't have any US investors, rather your investors are from the UK or from somewhere else in Europe. And they would prefer that you register a UK company. But now you have a US registered company that you don't need, that you did not even need in the first place, and the cost of maintaining would be expensive. The cost of shutting it down would also be expensive. So you want to make sure that you have crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's before you go ahead to register a company. Now, I also just want to walk through a couple of checklists. This is just for peace of mind, some things that you need to check. So if you already have a company registered, you can go back and look at some of these steps, like go through some of the steps. So this is my company. My company is called, okay, that's Legal Trunk, right? What's the company structure of Legal Trunk? How is Legal Trunk registered? Is it registered as a limited liability company? Is it registered as a corporation? Is it registered as a sole proprietorship? Is it registered as a non-profit? You want to be sure of what kind of company structure that you are either registered as or you are intending to register as. This is important because the kind of structure that you are registered in determines what you're able to do with the company. And a good example of this is using the US or the Delaware registration, for instance. There are two very popular types of registrations that people do in Delaware. They either register as a corporation or as an LLC, which is a limited liability company. On the surface, they look similar because the legal structure is to an extent similar. But there's a very important difference between those two. And that difference is a corporation is able to issue shares to its to shareholders, but a limited liability company does not have any shares to issue. So it's basically what it has is they're just members, people who sign, say, a partnership agreement, but there's no share structure in that business. So if you would be raising funds from investors, then you want to make sure that you have a corporation and not an LLC, because if you have an LLC, then you would need to go through the process of converting it from an LLC to a corporation. So that's what I mean by be sure of what the company structure you have or are planning to have and make sure that it aligns with your business goals and interests. Next point would be make sure that your incorporation documents are up to date. So have your certificates of incorporation, your articles of association or memorandum of association or incorporator initial resolutions, whatever forms the incorporation document of your business. You need to have all those things. Ideally, you should have a folder where all those things are kept so you can just refer to them when you need them. And another check you need is your IP protected? Is it registered? Is your brand name protected? Is it trademark? If you have unique technology that needs to be patented, is it patented? Have you started or are you going through that process of making sure that your intellectual property is protected legally? Another important point is, have you done your tax registration? Do you have a tax ID number? This is important for a business. If you're trying to set up a bank account, you need it. If you need to pay taxes, you need it. It's something that you cannot really avoid. And so you want to make sure that that is sorted. As I mentioned earlier, I talked about data protection, depending on the jurisdiction where you operate and where your customers come from. You need to make sure that you are complying with the data protection laws of those jurisdictions. Next point is, do you have all the foundational agreements you need and are they signed? So do you have co-founder agreements? Have all your co-founders signed them? Do you have intellectual property transfer agreements with everybody that is working on anything that relates to your company? You need to have those agreements signed. Do you have employment contracts? Is it clearly defined what each person's role, obligations, and all those things are? These things are very important so that when you have disputes, it would even stipulate how disagreements can be resolved by the company. Okay, I think I'm going to round up now. And then having an annual compliance calendar is very important because at a glance, you're able to see, okay, these are the things I need to do for this year for my entity, and this is when I need to do those things. So do you have a calendar that just outlines deadlines for different filings that needs to be done? Oh, this needs to be done by March, this needs to be done in April, this other one needs to be done by June. You need to have all those things to have explained. All right. I am rounding up now. So having said all these things, I hope that you've come to a point where you understand what's what the considerations you need to have are, how you should be thinking about structuring your business, how you should be thinking about your compliance. And so how do we help, right? We've talked about the importance of, or I've talked about the importance of having experts, having experienced people hold your hand through this journey so that you're not making any mistakes. And this is the point where I do a little shout out to Legal Trunk and tell you about some of the things that we do at Legal Trunk. And so one of the key things that we do is we help you with ascertaining the right corporate structure and then handling your registration across different jurisdictions. We help you, as I said, structure your startup. So if you want to be funding ready, ensuring that you have the right structure, you have the right number of shares, something as little as that, the right, what's the authorized share for this kind of company? How should I structure it? What's standard? What is what if I need to increase it. These are some of the things that will help you compliance partner. So we help you handle compliance in whatever jurisdiction that you're registering in, just to make sure that you are compliant with the regulations and obligations of those jurisdictions. There's intellectual property protection, there's helping with your legal documents customization, and just general staff advisory. We exist so that founders can focus on building, you can focus on creating, on innovating rather than bureaucracy. So if you are not 100% confident that your startup is compliant, we're here to help. We're here to keep you compliant, help you ensure that you are doing everything that needs to be done. You can scan the QR code on the screen and book a consultation with us and take it up from there. But this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. If there are any questions, you can drop them in the chat. And I think after the second speaker, we would then take questions, if I'm not mistaken. But Panashe would direct on how that would be handled. Thank you very much.